Good evening and welcome to the second and final Inside Government for the fall 2025 semester here at Cayuga Community College. This is a show that's shown on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, and playing on Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in the studio today the New York State Senator that represents all of Cayuga County, Rachel May, who represents the 48th Senate District that includes the City of Auburn, all of Cayuga County, and parts of Onondaga County, including the Village of Skaneateles, where this show is shown. We've asked her on to talk about what is going on in the news, give us a bit of an Albany update, and also an outlook of what's coming up with the next budget, which is only 5 months away, process-wise. We might even talk a little bit of politics at the end of this. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me just say, I was able to sit backstage and watch your team back there and the great work they do.
Thank you.
You must be proud.
We are very proud of this program and all these students and the staff here. So I want to ask you, the government has now reopened, at least officially, as of last night after 43 days. How did it impact New York?
So in terms of the state budget, we still don't know for sure how it's impacted us, but thousands of people lost their jobs during that period of time. Obviously, people's flights were delayed. There was enormous anxiety and real loss in terms of the SNAP benefits that people rely on for their daily meals, and we saw food lines around the block for our food banks, our food pantries. So it had a real impact.
But it's also only kicking the can down the road, while SNAP will be saved in a possible January shutdown, because there are a couple of pieces that were not, that are being continued until next October. There are other pieces that could all go up in smoke again in 3 months, correct?
That's true.
Okay, so let's talk about SNAP first, because you represent a district where we had the Assistant Superintendent of Schools here on Tuesday. She talked about a food drive there. I know there's a food drive here on campus. We have, in fact, the telecom students are doing a food drive for the college pantry as well. Do you have an idea in your district alone, in the 48th, how many SNAP beneficiaries? We know that's 1 in 8 Americans. We know it's about 42 million Americans. Do you have an idea in your district how many people were affected?
Well, if it's 1 in 8, that would be about 40,000 constituents of mine. But because we have the highest child poverty in the country in the city of Syracuse, there's a high percentage of families in Syracuse that are affected. But we also know that a lot of rural communities have high poverty, and they depend on SNAP as well. So it's hard to say, but it's going to affect lots of communities. And sadly, the budget bill that the shutdown was about contains cuts to SNAP as well.
Still, even though that it's being continued until...
Right, not as drastic, but
so
it's
that tends. So I want to talk about trickle-down economics in not the form that most people usually talk about. I always think that when there's government cuts from Washington for Albany, it creates a weird dilemma, or not a weird, an awful dilemma for you. And let's just take education for a second. So they're going to cut the education department, and do you happen to know how much money New York gets from the federal government on education?
You know, I've been trying to track this down, and I don't have the numbers, but it's in the billions, and it has to do with specifically with students with disabilities of various
special education
kinds,
issues,
and after-school programs,
and
support for homeless youth.
So when the federal government backs out of that, my thought is that then Albany needs to fill the breach. Maybe not needs to, but will fill the breach. Let me put it that way. But there's a finite amount of money you have in New York, and that means that there's a domino effect or a trickle down that goes to programs that may not have as vocal or public persona in the budget process.
Well, it's also the case that we're talking about huge amounts of money, and we can't backfill that without gigantic revenue increases. And so we're in a real dilemma. We put emergency funds in this past budget so that the governor could backfill things like, as she did with SNAP there in the last couple weeks. But we're talking, a few $1 billion, not tens of billions of dollars, which is what we're looking at in terms of the hit that we're expecting from the federal government, from the Medicaid decreases especially.
So I didn't want to get into the budget, the outlook. I would like to talk about the past budget because you haven't been on. You were on in the middle of the budget last time you were on, but let's talk about the outlook though. I don't know, is the Senate doesn't necessarily meet formally for votes in November, December, correct? But I'm assuming your conference is having conversations about what the outlook is for the governor to give her state of the state in early January, and then she will release a budget by the end of 20th or 25th of January. So what are you and your conference looking at as the gap, as the concern? Because again, the government may shut down again in January. Not that I'm not being an optimist, I'm being a realist.
Right. So we know we're going to face cuts. We know we're going to have to deal with that. But part of, I think, the strategy of the federal government right now, this whole Project 2025 strategy, is to make it so we have no idea what's happening.
So it's like a snow globe. Everything's just
exactly
over and over again shaken up.
So that we don't know how to respond to it. And all we're doing is playing defense all the time. That's their goal, it seems to me.
For all states, not just New York.
For all states, right. For the whole country. And but when you are in a position of responsibility and you have to come up with a state budget and you don't know what the inputs are, that's far more difficult than it is in a normal year.
So following my analogy of the trickle-down cuts, does the state have I know it's been maybe 4 months since the July 4th signing of the big, beautiful bill. Does the state know, okay, we know we're going to have these gaps in these particular, or is that information still not to the states yet?
Well, part of the reason for the shutdown was that, and I don't entirely understand how this works, but the big, beautiful bill wasn't the actual spending resolution, right? So that's what this shutdown was about.
But there are policy pieces
whether they were going to actually enact every bit of the big, beautiful bill. So, which includes these giant cuts to the Affordable Care Act. So then the question becomes, what are we paying for at the state level in terms of health insurance? Do we know? Probably after today, if they've finally voted on that bill, we can figure that out. But it's been a long time that we have had uncertainty about this.
So obviously you get a lot of lobbying from school districts. And the mayor talked very highly about you a few minutes ago and talked about AIM funding for cities and whatnot.
Right.
But education tends to be the piece that in an election year not only increases in normal years, but in an election year it kind of gets supercharged. Is there going to be that ability for the So let me this is not real math, all right? But if the mayor, the governor comes in and she recommends X for the schools. And then what happens then is the legislature usually gets involved and it goes up by 5, 10%, whatever. Is there going to be that even ability if she shows fiscal restraint on school districts that are already going to see the federal spigot turn off?
Right. So I will say I came into office in 2019 and we had a $4 billion deficit in education spending compared to what the courts said the state owed our schools. And I'm very proud that we have closed that gap. We now have full funding for foundation aid, but that is not all of the funding that the school districts get.
And it hasn't fixed the formula by
It
any
hasn't
means.
fixed the formula, but I do think we will continue to fund it fully. The question is, what about all those other pieces that we have relied on federal aid for? And that's a question that we did make a commitment to pay for school lunches. And we are doing that in this budget, but normally some of that money comes from the federal government. Now the state is having to backfill that. So it is a question. If we have done about a 2% increase on the governor's education budgets. As a legislature, we've added about that much in the last few years. Honestly, it's anyone's guess. I think we're all hoping we don't have to make cuts.
So the reason I go with this is because I do think, I'm looking at this from a history point of view, the legislature has added money. If you have to backfill in part or whole, that's one issue. What I'm looking at is those other agencies and organizations, whether they're in the arts or they deal with poverty or they deal with the environment or transportation, they come to you on traditionally what I think is called Tin Cup Days, which are Tuesdays in Albany.
We call them lobby days.
Okay. Those who are coming to you call them Tin Cup Days, maybe. At least that was always the mayor's always thought that. They're going to get squeezed in this budget, likely.
You know, we're going to be trying to make sure that we're fulfilling the obligations that we have and making sure that the neediest New Yorkers are getting what they need. But we really have no idea what the parameters are beyond that and what we're going to be able to do. So I'm part of a group that advocates and has advocated over the years for increasing revenue, because here in New York we have Wall Street, we have a lot of the billionaires in the world. We have seen over the last decades an enormous increase in inequality, where the very wealthiest people now, even like I don't remember the statistic I saw recently, but it was like there are 10 people who own more than 4 billion people on Earth. It's just shocking what the inequality is. And there are mechanisms for recovering some of that extreme wealth that is floating around in New York State.
But can you get 30?
But that's the question, can we get the
32 votes in the Senate?
I think it's going to depend on how dire the situation is, and that's what we have to wait and see.
Where's the governor in all that part about what you're talking about is your group?
She has resisted revenue raisers, although we did do a multi-millionaire tax a couple years ago. But, you know, the question is going to be what the alternatives are.
So I want to go back to the government shutdown for a piece that you touched on, and that was the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. So 22 million Americans are going to see premium increases in January. There seems to be no question that, I mean, they can have a vote in the Senate, but it doesn't sound like Speaker Johnson's going to have a vote in the House to do that, because that's not part of his deal, as he has said to the press. Do you have any idea how many New Yorkers, or be more importantly in your district, get benefits from the ACA?
Oh, it's millions, but the really key number is about 450,000 is my understanding of people who fall in. So we're going to be able at the state, or the proposal at the state is to go back to what was called the basic plan from the essential plan, essentially, which means we can cover people up to 200% of poverty level, that they can get access to the essential or the basic plan. Right now, it's people up to 250% of the poverty level, and that group in between
is going to get hit.
Is going to lose their access.
Unless they can pay the premium.
The Affordable Care, right, to the Low Cost Affordable Care Act.
So
that's a lot of people.
So I haven't been in Albany in 6 months. I think that was the last time I was over there. You have not figured out a U.S. Mint printing press there. So where does the money come from for just the health insurance? Because there's again, this is more of a domino effect. We all know that it's more expensive to treat a patient who goes to an emergency room instead of who goes to the regular doctor. Anybody, we had a doctor here a couple weeks ago. She'll tell you the same. Dr. Archer with the health department will tell you it's always better to go see your primary care physician than walk into Auburn Community Hospital. And I know you've been a supporter of that, but there's a dollar question there. How does that get made up?
So if people show up at the emergency room and they don't have insurance, the hospitals are required to treat them, but they don't get reimbursed for that. So what we're going to see...
But they will come to the state at some point if they have to be bailed out.
Yeah, but we're going to see more and more hospitals closing, and especially rural hospitals where most of their clientele is on Medicaid, and people are going to start coming in and they won't have any coverage.
And that's separate from the federal government changing the mileage requirements, that if you have a hospital which is a rural hospital and so many miles of another, they may close that one of those hospitals in those zones.
Yeah, that's a separate thing. This is just the sheer economics of running a hospital. If your clientele doesn't have insurance, you are out that money.
So do you have 4 or 5? You've got Community, which has got 2 branches. You've got St. Joe's. You've got Upstate. You've got Auburn. Do you have anybody else in your district? Crouse. What are all those presidents, CEOs, directors telling you?
They're nervous, but I will say it's the smaller hospitals that are most nervous.
Like in Auburn.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the local practices and the community health centers and even like the emergency medical care folks, they also have to pick up somebody who's having an emergency, and if that person doesn't have Medicaid, doesn't have any coverage, that's a problem for them too.
Okay, so let's shift gears. Let's get away from those numbers for a second.
Please, yes, it's too depressing.
No, well, so one of the changes that was supposed to go in on January 1st, and we asked both 2 gentlemen who represent Cayuga County with you as well, Minority Leader Barkley, Assemblyman Lamondis, was this issue on January 1st. There was going to be some fossil fuel equipment changes in regards to installing equipment that burns fossil fuels for new buildings of 7 stories or less. What was going to go into effect, and then tell us what's not occurring right away on January 1st.
Right. So the All Electric Buildings Act said that for new buildings, the energy source had to be electricity and not gas, and so that they were going to be built with heat pumps, with electric appliances, and you wouldn't have to lay a pipe a gas pipe to those buildings. You could save on that. Right now, there are a lot of different estimates about the cost of an electric building, but in general, the estimates are that over 10 years it will save you money if you have an all-electric building.
And there were some exemptions on that. If you were a 10,000 square foot building, if there were other exemptions along that way.
Factories and
factories are a perfect example.
Yeah.
So what does that mean that there's now been a change on the January 1st date?
Yeah, there was a lawsuit, and so they've just delayed the implementation of that.
Till when, or what happens?
Until the lawsuit is resolved.
So this is indefinitely on hold. This is not, we've kicked the can from January 1st to August 31st. It is on hold.
It's just on hold for pending that lawsuit. And there is a bill in the legislature to grandfather in all, the projects that have already been permitted, that they could go ahead with.
How would this affect something like Micron? Clearly, they're beyond the 10,000 square foot.
It doesn't affect their building, but the effort to develop housing for people we expect to come to the area for.
Oh, and the mayor just talked about 2 in Auburn, one on the
Right.
west side of Bluefield and
That's
one
certainly
in downtown.
affected.
Speaking of Micron, just this not comes to mind. Obviously, there's some news about delays. Any concerns on your end?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the world and a lot of uncertainty about,
Do you still see it moving
international-
forward, though?
I think so. I think, they've done an awful lot of laying the groundwork and a lot of all of the ancillary preparation that you have to make for something like that. So I do think they're committed to our area, but it is always concerning when there's a delay like that.
I want to go back to energy just on one quick item, and this is the electrification of school buses.
Yeah.
It's a mandate to have electric school buses by when?
Yeah, that's another moving target, I think, that we put that into effect for
I want to say 2027.
27.
Okay.
But the reality is that that bill was passed at a time when the federal government was a partner in trying to develop, electric transportation. And we were seeing very rapid changes in the cost and the effectiveness of electric vehicles. And we can't be requiring school districts to do something if the equipment isn't available.
But is
So
that
that's
mandate
the
still in place, and you may have to
issue.
revisit that issue?
I think we'll have to revisit the timing.
And that's
of
likely
it.
a spring item. The other item that comes in your district, you have a long, narrow county here. There's a lot of discussions about wind farms. There's a lot of discussion about solar farms, and sometimes towns and villages not wanting them, but then Albany overriding them in the process. Who should be in charge of whether a solar farm or a wind farm gets located in a particular county? Is there some local control that local boards should have, or should this be run by the state of New York?
So I have just introduced a bill that would provide a lot more transparency and some brakes on that system. I do very strongly believe that we need to move off of fossil fuels and to a green energy future. And I also believe globally that is happening at a rapid pace, and we will be left behind, the rest of the world, if we don't do what we can now. And at the same time, I hear all the time from my constituents who are scared or upset or angry about projects that are slated to happen in their
So
vicinity.
what would your bill do?
It would really make the process a lot more transparent, so people could track what was going on, how the process
they
of
stop
the
it?
decision making. It adds more guardrails when it comes to things like the geology, because I've heard people who are really concerned about, mudslides and effects to the water table and that kind of thing, and it would make sure that those concerns
So permitting issues on that.
are being considered. But I also,
You think the state needs to move forward in those renewables?
I do, and I also think that a lot of the fears are being stoked by the fossil fuel industry, which is convincing people that these projects are a lot more dangerous or damaging than they are. And we at the state level have to take a broader view of this.
So I want to, again, switching gears, on September 4th, federal ICE agents went to a food production facility in Cato, which is again in your district.
Yeah.
Have you, as a state legislator, been briefed about that raid?
Not specifically. We've talked to a lot of the people who were affected by it, and
But not necessarily, the federal government has not said,
federal
you're
government.
no role there.
No.
Have you been in contact with the people who own Incredimeal?
My staff have been,
Okay.
yeah.
And what are they telling you?
Well, they're beside themselves about their employees and what's happened to them, but also the disruption to their business has been intense.
So we had Sheriff Skankin here right after the raids, and there were indications about what he was told, whether they were correctly informed from law enforcement, whether it was here or the Oswego Sheriff's Department. And I know that Channel 9 had a report, Andrew Donovan had a report about they were looking for violent criminals, but there might not have been evidence. Do you think local law enforcement was informed correctly from what you've heard about what this type of raid was like?
I really can't judge about that, but I do want to say that these enforcement actions that ICE is taking are, they're acting, in my opinion, before, they're like acting first, asking questions later, and that a lot of what they're doing has no bearing on actual public safety or whatever they talked about catching, the worst of the worst. It has nothing to do with that.
So there is a local talk in the Cayuga County legislature about proposing a resolution that says that the Sheriff's Department should not cooperate with federal immigration raids. We don't know if that'll come up for a vote. I know there's a lot of talk about that. What do you tell county legislators or town or village boards or the city if they come up with these non-cooperation, should they pass these resolutions?
So that is the policy in Onondaga County, and the reason that the sheriff gives for that is that they need people to be able to reach out to them if they're facing some kind of a crime or if they're witnesses to a crime and they can't have a big part of the population be too afraid to come forward to them.
And so if they cooperate with ICE, that would be that perception.
Right.
So
and I think the Syracuse police are operating on the same principle.
And so you would not necessarily see that as a problem here in Cayuga County if the legislature passed a similar resolution?
No, I think it would make sense.
One of the items as you were here back, you remember you passed a budget 7 months ago?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One of the items that was on your plate, though, was to reform the bottle bill.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, you had several proposals. I think it was to increase the rate, but also expand what is covered. So, because if I open a Snapple or a water, not a water, but a Snapple or iced teas, they're not covered, and there's others. Where is that? Did you get something passed? Where does it stand right now?
I wish we had. We did not get that passed. We did pass through the Senate the bill, the companion bill, which is the Packaging Reduction Act, which is, I got to say, kind of intertwined with the bottle bill. Yeah, we're trying to raise the deposit, pay the redemption centers enough that they can stay open.
Since this
they've been
was
closing right and left.
No, but they also started with 5% or 5 cents. How many decades ago?
3.5 cents.
No, but I'm saying the 5% has been in place.
5 cent was put in place in 1983.
Inflation might have raised?
It's 15 cents now. We're just asking for 10. So, I mean, if you just by inflation, it would have gone up to 15.
And so this would also expand into what is covered bottle-wise?
It would, it would cover a lot more bottles. And we did hear at the end of this session when it looked like the Packaging Reduction Act was going to pass, because that would cover everybody who produces packaging, that, for example, the wine and liquor industry wasn't crazy about being under that bill. They would rather be under our bill. So I think if we can get to the point where we're going to pass that, the bottle bill will be in play in a different way as well.
So just explain to our viewers the process. So that was this year in 2025.
Right.
Do you have to redo everything for 2026, or you can still get this over the finish line before the Assembly and the Senate adjourn next summer?
Right. So when we're elected every 2 years. We introduce bills. They keep their same number for 2 years that we're in office. In the Assembly, if they had passed it this year, it would still count as passed next year. In the Senate, we have to do it again each year, but if we pass it 1 year, it's pretty easy to pass it the next year.
So are you optimistic?
About the bottle bill, my guess is we will pass the Packaging Reduction Act first, and then the bottle bill, partly because people are really concerned about affordability right now, and even though that deposit, people get the deposit back, it would increase what you pay at the checkout, and nobody wants to be causing that. So I'm guessing that that's going to be pushed till a later date.
With the minute that I have, and I'm giving the heads up, because
Okay.
we'll ask the favorite question in a moment. Are you supporting Governor Hochul or Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado for governor next year, or aren't you there yet?
I haven't made an endorsement yet.
Is it weird to you that the Lieutenant Governor is running against? Why
It is
would
a
he
strange
stand?
situation.
Wouldn't
yeah.
he normally just have stepped down from that position?
Yeah, that probably would make sense. I know she's looking for a different running mate.
Okay. And are you seeking re-election next year?
I am.
You are. So this is the favorite question. This is the final question because I'm getting the hindsight. Do you read books or do you listen to books?
Yes.
Okay.
Both.
What is on your book stand or on your phone right now?
Okay. So right now I am reading a book, an actual paper book that I'm blanking on the name of it. It's
What's it
It's
about?
called Sandwich.
Okay.
It's about a family that goes to Cape Cod every summer to the town of Sandwich, and it's a hilarious book about a woman kind of going through menopause and looking at her family differently as they're all aging, but it is so funny. I laugh almost every page.
And when you leave here, if you're not getting on the phone, what are you listening to in your vehicle?
In my vehicle, I just got a book, and now you're putting me on the spot.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction. It's called Injustice, and it's about how the Trump Justice Department has totally changed what we think the Justice Department should be.
Thank you for your time. The
Yeah,
last 30 minutes
my
is gone.
pleasure.
Hopefully we'll have you in the spring before budget, and we'll get to that. But our guest has been New York State Senator Rachel May, who represents the 48th Senate District here in central New York, which covers all of Cayuga County, the city of Auburn, and parts of Onondaga, including Skaneateles. We look forward to having her back to talk about the 2026-27 budget. Before we go, this is our final session or program for the fall 2025 semester here at the college. I want to thank all of the students and the staff who put this on. Between the political forums that we do and this public affairs programming, we wouldn't do it without them, and they do a great job, as the senator alluded to at the beginning of the program. We also want to thank Professor Laura Bailey, Jeff Sesnak, and Rick Basha, who make us all look and sound great. I'm 10 years younger when they put me on, so I thank them for that. We'll be back in February, about mid part of the month, so please tune in then. You can send us your thoughts for guests or questions at cozguytho@aol.com. But I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We hope you have a great Thanksgiving, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas, and New Year, and we'll see you back here in mid-February.